Yeah, the late great David Foster Wallace, who used to teach just down the road from us, if you take Route 47, Illinois State University. And in fact, I'm proud to mention that I taught right alongside him just for a year, way back when. Wallace, Wallace laughed with Kafka. As he writes in this little late edition to your readings for the week, I don't really expect you to read it, but you're certainly welcome to. And I listed it on the website under content. He writes, another handicap, even for gifted students, is that unlike, say, Joyce's or Pound's, the exformative associations Kafka's work creates are not intertextual or even historical. Kafka's evocations are, rather, unconscious and almost sub-archetypal. The little kid stuff. The little kid stuff. You just read a little comic there, Calvin and Hobbes. The little kid stuff from which myths derive, those Kafka dreams. This is why we tend to call even his weirdest, most Kafka dreamiest stories nightmarish rather than surreal. Not to mention that the particular sort of funniness Kafka deploys is deeply alien to kids whose neural resonances are American. The fact is that Kafka's humor has almost none of the particular forms and codes of contemporary U.S. amusement. And Wallace goes on. I'm going to let you read the rest of his passage here on your own, right? And, just still stop the film, right? And read the rest of it if you'd like. It's actually a wonderful little comment. I think it's more a comment on on us, on Americans, than it is a comment in American humor than I think it is a comment on Kafka. But I think you would find it very interesting. So I'm going to let you do that, and then please move on. Okay, having moved on, note how Emma, Alexis, and Jocelyn quote the Norton in answer to 200 mod 5Q2. Theme, what is theme? Theme is a, quote, general idea or insight conveyed by the work in its entirety. It's the universal idea that the story conveys about life, society, or human nature, that's Aaron. It's spoken of as the theme with the definite article, the as opposed to a. When spoken so, it is the overarching meaning of the story. Adriana, student in a different section. Its essential meaning. Jocelyn, from her own section. It is not that a story has only one idea or meaning, as Adriana also quotes. A theme is any idea a work conveys, and there can be a few, or there can be just one. And as Jocelyn notes, one's insight can differ from those of others and may form a differing view of the work's point, of its essential meaning. Michael agrees. Well, I don't think the metamorphosis has only one theme. Now you see there's a little bit of a difference between Jocelyn's point and Michael's. Jocelyn thinks that people can disagree. Michael thinks that people can disagree also. But he thinks that, in fact, there might be more than one theme upon which people might disagree, in the sense that there may be a multiplicity of themes that any particular work might have, right? And it isn't a matter of just disagreeing as to which central theme there is. What I would like to say to Michael and to others who believe in this multiplicity, that I think it's a good idea, and I think I agree, right? But note the way that we often speak of theme, as in, quote, the theme of X or Y. That's the way we usually talk about them, right? It's the way we usually talk about a work of literature, which suggests that we tend to assume that one idea is more central or overarching and inclusive than the others. Though we sometimes say a theme, we tend to say the theme, right? And I would say this to Jocelyn. It's interesting the extent to which when we just tend to be talking about the themes of works, we tend to, once again, say the theme as though the multiplicity of possible formulations of that central idea, okay, amongst that multiplicity, probably one is going to come to the foreground. So let's not too quickly abandon the notion of theme, the notion of a real solid sense of what this book is about, what any book is about, on behalf of our typical democratic, which I'm in favor of, right? Our typical democratic sense that, look, individuals are going to have very different views of whatever the object is that they happen to be contemplating. And therefore, it is an imposition of will to choose one over another. Let's imagine that there's at least an ideal reading whereby just a few major formulations of any particular story's theme come to the front and people argue over what they are, as opposed to a radical indeterminacy and multiplicity of possible themes. But that's slightly a different thing. Speaking of themes, that's a slightly different issue than the one I want to address in what follows on this plate. And we may come back to that question of what we do when we read a work of literature later in the semester. Note that Mays, according to Khalil, is not yet done, right? When she mentions that theme as a general idea or insight. Khalil says, as she continues, she says this: though a theme is specific in the sense that it is a complete idea or statement rather than a topic, it is nonetheless a general idea rather than one that describes a character's plot or settings unique to one story. Absolutely, and I want to really emphasize that, right? And what follows? Another way of putting that distinction, and it's the earlier part of that sentence that I find to be most valuable for us in this moment, right? That distinction between theme and topic. Topic is what we get in hand when, moving beyond mere story, we have begun working out the plot. Oh, so this is what the story is about. It's about loneliness. On the other hand, the theme is what we have in hand when, having moved past mere story to plot, we have finished working out the plot. Oh, so this is what the story, plot, author, text is saying about or on the topic of loneliness. Okay? So let's formulate that all in one quick little sentence. The topic is what the story is about. The theme, what it says about what it is about. Okay? The topic is what the story is about. The theme of the story, okay, is what it says, what the story says about what it is about. Now, it's easy to confuse theme and topic. One can argue that many dictionaries do so, right? For example, the Collins Dictionary. But the Nortons, for example, the Norton folks, the Norton person, Mays, although she's assisted by a whole group, Mays insists that equating theme with subject or topic is using the term very loosely. And I agree with her, right? I don't think that these two terms, topic and theme, are equivalent. They're not synonyms. And I think it's very important to hold them apart so that we do have a word for that fuller sense of a story's meaning, right? Which goes by the way of theme, as opposed to merely what, the various topics or subjects that it might be about. Now I'm going to get into some of the things that you had to say in this question. Note how Adriana, okay, who is from a different section, ends her contribution by eschewing such loose usage as eschewed, right, by the Norton, by Mays. Having worked through the plot a bit, this is why I believe, she says, the main theme of the metamorphosis is responsibility, duty that forces one into a personal metamorphosis. I would offer a friendly emendation, quote, responsibility, duty forces one into a personal metamorphosis. What is Kay in this story saying about or on the topic of responsibility or duty? That's a topic. Responsibility, duty, those are the topics. Those are the subjects. What's he saying? What he's saying about responsibility and duty, that's the theme. He is saying that it may force a change, right? Responsibility may force a change. Duty may force an alteration, and perhaps a harmful one. We're used to thinking of duty as a virtuous thing, right? To do your duty is a good thing. Kafka says yes, often, but note how an uncritical devotion to duty, such as we have perhaps exhibited by Gregor, a heedless acceptance of responsibility, can be disastrous. Pretty good description of what happens in the story, and it's a thematic, okay, formulation of the theme of the story. Now, it's very easy to state a topic and feel we've covered the theme. Jimmy suggests the theme of the metamorphosis is the struggle for self-identity. That's close, being a good statement of topic, bordering upon a statement of theme. Such is what the story may be about, that human struggle. What is the story saying about that struggle, right? A statement of such would be a statement of its theme. Aaron, quote, the central theme of Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis revolves around alienation and isolation. Perhaps. Those are topics, though, not themes. That's what the story's about. The story's about alienation, right? But what does it say about it? What does it say about human isolation, human alienation? Mark points to the novella's interest in, quote, the struggle of falling under the weight of one's own poor mental health. Note how a minor adjustment makes this good statement of topic a good statement of theme. Quote, the theme is that one's own poor mental health will weigh one down however one struggles. Nathan, from another section, offers a nice explanation of the many changes we encounter as we read this work. Kafka, he argues, quote, he's interested, obviously, you can tell, in the theme of transformation, metamorphosis. Kafka, or the topic, I should say, see, even I can fall into it. Kafka, he argues, quote, shows the impact of what such changes can do to people. Now, that's a pretty good statement of theme there. The book is about change. That's its topic. Change, a change of responsibilities, a change of individuals, within individuals as well. Psychological change, perceptual change, what have you. Social change, family change, as we're going to see in the next plate. What's its theme, though? What's it saying about these changes, right? Such change has an impact, a certain forcible influence which does things to people. That's what it's saying about change. Sarli, the most apparent theme in the Metamorphosis is that life is wildly unpredictable. Good. The topic is life. The theme, what's it saying about life? Life is wildly unpredictable. Topic and theme in the Metamorphosis. Well, obviously, we've already begun to explore these questions. Let me add to what's already been said by quoting Olivia. Kafka shows how, quote, society may turn to ostracizing behaviors at the height of change. I find quite illuminating ends, in Michael's sense, ends from another section, that the topic, or at least one topic, is that of a particular subset of society, the family. Its toxicity, its capacity for estrangement, as Michael puts it, from certain of its members. As N asserts, it's an extremely sad case of a family that we have in this book, turning on their own because they can no longer fit their perception and their responsibility that they forced upon them. Family love appears to have fled and been replaced by a forced, deliberate patience at best, and only for a time. To put the point in properly thematic terms, might we say that Kafka, offers a harsh critique of the family as a social unit prone to turning on its own, when, quote, its own, whether son, mother, husband, wife, or in this case brother, fails to perform its assigned duty, fails even to be the person they require him to be. To put it more pithily, families all too often eat their own. And working through the plot, quote, Gregor's family had relied on his income for quite a while to get by because his father had accrued a lot of debt. This is where some might make the argument that Gregor's family exploited him. He recovered every expense his family had earlier, but once he was in need due to turning into this giant bug, he was isolated, mistreated, and forgotten. Eventually, his family wanted to be rid of him entirely. This story really shows just how devoted Gregor was to the well-being of his family, only for it not to be reciprocated when he needed his family most. As Michael concurs, adding detail, quote, his sister's Gretz, a gradual slackening of attention to him, along with his father's escalation, you will recall, from the initial shooing of Gregor back into his room to chasing him around and throwing things at him, vividly illustrates how the attitudes of loved ones can shift over a prolonged period of time from understanding and empathy to indifference to feeling burdened. Note how close Michael comes in this very nice formulation to stating the work's general idea or insight. The truth of family for Kafka is that it is not the sphere of unconditional love that so many of us assume it to be. Okay, what if topic and theme in The Hunger Artist? The Hunger Artist seeks what Casey calls a badge of honor. That was well named. May this badge be won by means of audience recognition, or must it pass some more personal, private test? Casey speaks of the artist's pride as it founded on social approval, in which case the badge is something you'd wear in front of audiences and around your friends and buddies. You can imagine a hunger artist having a buddy, right? Or is this a private badge, some kind of abstract sense of individual self-satisfaction that requires no communal element? Well, it's the former, saith Nanette and Alexis. Nanette, the artist yearned for the applause of others to feel pride in his fasting, not just because he wanted to, not just because he sought private satisfaction in doing what he wanted, but because he wanted others to notice him. Alexis concurs. Because of the fact that nobody was able to watch him 24/7, there was nobody but himself who would know if he actually went through with the fasting or not. And this matters. Quote, I think that took a small toll on him. Without there being a way to prove to others that his fasting was real, I think he felt a little like a failure. Self-satisfaction is not enough. But I believe that the story has a theme of failure and of being underappreciated, as Alexis asserts. To be unappreciated by others is to fail, no matter how well one knows one has performed. Moreover, fail one will, inevitably, should one locate one's sense of self-worth and social appreciation. Jocelyn says, quote, the theme found throughout the story is that the artist's pride in his work does not grant him fame, but loneliness and obscurity. Hence the saying, it can get lonely at the top. Quote, the artist's desire to be respected, admired, causes him to continue to find alternate ways to show his talent, even if it means going to such an extreme that it eventually causes his death. Even if it means. Perhaps we could amend that to say, even though it will always mean. That seems the force of this story. Depending on others for a sense of worth, a sense of self-worth, will harm and can kill. Ironically, as Khalil notes, quote, the hunger artist's fasting, again, he said this before, only led to a suffering and alienation. Get that, seeking social acceptance and approval can lead, ironically, to social estrangement. And as we've already seen, that's the least of it. So is there a consensus in the class? The topic is socially mediated pride. The topic, this is the subject, socially mediated pride, fame, good repute. And it's the trek for such, right? The search after such. What's then the theme? What, in fact, is the story telling us about such socially mediated pride? Well, that such socially based pride socially alienates. At best, indeed, it can destroy. But note how, this is why I don't think we really do have a consensus. Note how Casey opens the door. I mean, even some of the people who are contributing to what seemed to be the consensus, I think, are having second thoughts that show up, I think, rather wisely and acutely amidst their commentary. Note how Casey opens the door to a different sense of his sort of pride. Now, she's just opening the door, but she says this. It drives him to be an isolated person. This is clear when he is at the circus, for after the first weeks, this is a quote from the story itself, even this small task, tracking his fasting, seemed pointless to the staff. Well, does his fasting continue desperately, right? If only he fasts hard enough, people start paying attention again. Or does it persist beyond audience attention as a sort of end in itself? Okay, see how that notion crops up in what Casey has said. And Alexis as well. Alexis writes, quote, as the folks watched him constantly just sit there and get skinnier and skinnier. They weren't actually seeing the art and what he was trying to do. And so he felt really underappreciated. Now, is it enough for him to see, quote, the art and what he was trying to do, right? You could sort of see that as one conceivable sense of what's going on in the story, you know, which is not to say that the audience approval doesn't matter at all, but there's a deeper source of satisfaction that he seeks and that he, in fact, needs. Nanette notes how the hunger artist, quote, does not want to stop even when the audience loses interest. I mean, that would seem to be, again, unless that's a desperate thing, right? I'm going to keep doing it because finally I can get the audience maybe in the end to pay some attention. You wonder whether there isn't another motive that is ranges beyond, okay, any concern about the audience. Quote, why stop now when he was in his best fasting form? This is something he says to himself. Or rather, not yet quite in his best fasting form, okay? Here's the question. Is he a formalist, this business about fasting form, with the word form being repeated twice? His motto, art for art's sake, form for form's sake, right, takes this deep satisfaction in having achieved an excellent, perhaps the most excellent of all possible fasting forms. And he's not going to quit until he does so. He doesn't care whether anybody sees it or not. It's enough for him to see it. Is that indeed, you know, we could argue that's another problem and a deeper problem, if you see what I'm saying, in addition to his concern about audience approval. Nanette follows up, quote, the artist seemed to have contempt for the audience, right, as he felt he could continue forever just to prove that he could do it. Prove it to himself or to them. And what I believe is happening in our discussion is that a few of you, several of you, are exploring, however briefly, the possibility that he's really trying to prove something to himself, not to anybody else in this story. I'm going to give Emma the last word because she is the one who is most targeted on this non-consensus claim, right? This alternative to what seemed to be our consensus. And this is what she had to say. And I've got some of my own stuff mixed in with what Emma has written. In The Hunger Artist, I think that a possible theme is that the quest for perfection, that's interesting. That's the topic, the quest for perfection. This quest for perfection is never ending, and that's not good. There's a formulation of the theme as opposed to the topic. What the story is saying about the quest for perfection. Once undertaken, it doesn't end, and until you end, right? Emma continues, we see an artist constantly fasting to achieve a perfect fasting form. Since people could not watch him 24/7, quote, no one could produce firsthand evidence that the fast had really been rigorous and continuous. Only the artist himself could know. He was therefore bound to be the sole, completely satisfied spectator of his own fast. You see how a quote like that, pulled out and zeroed in on, as Emma has done, really does seem to suggest that there's something beyond the social going on here in this story. It isn't simply a story about, the way that the search after fame can just kill you, right? What's the great movie? Stella Gibson, is that her name? Yeah, never mind. The quality of the fast performance, Emma continues, was ultimately up to the faster's interpretation of viewpoint. Quote, I am interjecting here. So why then does the story not have a happy ending, right? Well, because what you might imagine is, okay, if this is true, what Emma is saying, then the story ought to have a happy ending because after all, okay, the audience loses interest in him. Does he not take a certain satisfaction in his independence of the audience, maybe not as an end in itself, but as a sign that, in fact, what he cares about is form. What he cares about is doing it right? Doing a good job when nobody's looking, right? He's got character, isn't it? That's our usual definition of character, how you behave when nobody's looking, right? Why does the story have a happy ending? Because he sticks with it. He sticks with it. He does not stop fasting. Well, and here Emma also got some interesting lines onto the table because, quote, he was never satisfied. And perhaps it was dissatisfaction with himself that had worn him down, right? Even when he achieves a rigorous and continuous fast, it's not enough to completely satisfy, right? The hunger artist wants to constantly go beyond the bounds of what he can do. He's never been rigorous enough. He's never been continuous enough. And therefore, he's never completely satisfied, right? Because he just keeps wanting to go beyond the bounds of any particular achievement that he has obtained, right? And this is not good. This is something that does all those bad things that we were talking about above. Finally, let's introduce a third term for the week, really a fourth term. Theme, topic, issue. One theme of the Metamorphosis, Kafka's topic being change, or the human ability to manage change, more specifically. His theme is that ability is severely, shockingly limited. We are much less able to handle change than most of us think. We often do not handle change well. We resist it and then it overwhelms. We don't so much change as wake up and find that we have changed. I'm, of course, repeating some statements from the previous plates. That's the theme. What's the topic? I've already said it, but I'll say it again. Named by one of you, but implied by others, change. Prominent throughout the story was transformation. That's the topic, change. What is the issue? Well, whether or not we can well manage change. That's a good way to put the issue in a whether or not statement. The issue of the story is a question of the story with respect to its topic, what it is about. What does it ask about what it is about? Theme is the answer to that question. It is what it says about what it is about. The topic here being changed, the question here, the issue is, can we accept, deal with it, survive it? That's the issue. That is the issue that the story deals with. It's the issue of, and notice how it's put in a question in interrogative form, or by way of a whether or not statement. It has to do with change. Whether or not we can manage change well. Or can we manage change well? Can we manage change at all? That's a statement of issue as opposed to a statement of either topic or theme. The topic here being changed, the question here, the issue is, can we accept, deal with it, survive it? The topic being changed, the issue is whether we can accept it or whether humans have, according to Kafka, a fundamental dislike of change. whether when things are at all satisfactory, we'd like them to stay that way, to stay just the way they are, perhaps even ignoring or avoiding, and certainly not rising to the challenge of opportunities for self-improvement. Statements of issue often take the form of questions, as I just mentioned, or, as I mentioned, the form of a whether or not statement, which is really a kind of sentence fragment, but that's okay when you're stating an issue. Statements of issue often take the form of questions. A good way to formulate an issue is by way of the formula, whether or not X is, eats, hates, loves, influences, has X connection to, what have you. Why? Whether or not something is something else, or is something something else? That's the question, the interrogative form, as opposed to the whether or not form. Well, this is something we're going to be going back to. It's really pretty fundamental, these distinctions, but they're very important, I think, to a clear and consistent discussion of literature. And they are fundamental building blocks of literary critical discussion. It's to understand the difference between an issue, a topic, and a theme. So they're not going to go away, these blocks. We're going to be building on them throughout the semester, as you will be throughout your careers as undergraduate English majors. I regret that we didn't get around to questions of point of view. I never intended to, of course, because this is already an over 20-minute micro lecture, but I wanted to say that I thought the respondents to the questions on point of view did a splendid job and will be profiting from your insights in the coming weeks, because in fact, we're going back to point of view this coming week, even though there won't be a video this coming week. I think that there may be a video. There will certainly be some commentary and some questions about point of view in the future, and we'll have a chance then to profit from some of your insights. So that's it for today. Take care.